It's also important to recognize that every building is unique in its own way. So I'm going to try to give some examples, but I think a lot of it's going to come out in the questions and answers as we have a limited amount of time to get into too many actual examples as we're going through the slides here. So again, we want to be able to get your employees, your tenants back into your buildings. That's the ultimate goal here. Turn that down a little. Okay. I notice we're recording. I'm getting a little bit of noise feedback. I hope you're not getting that as well. Okay. One of the things I want to start with is talking about kiosk. This is really something you address from the moment you walk into your buildings. So again, where are you putting kiosks? What are they doing? Are they measuring everything from providing hand sanitizers to measuring temperature, facial recognition? Are there something that we're tying into our security systems as people will come in, protect, possibly be attaining badges, different things. So again, where are you going to put the kiosk? And of course, looking at your direction of how you're going to put the flow of people and directing them through the building so that you're accomplishing your goals as far as that. Now, the kiosk can have a lot of opportunity, but they can also give a lot of false information, okay, such as, are people wearing masks when they walk in? What is their temperature? This is a very difficult thing for the cameras and the software to really accomplish. The other thing you have to consider, too, is whether it's a security camera, a kiosk, a security person, somebody at the facility, if you see actions that are not, cohesive with the recommendations, whether it's, everybody has to wear masks in the common areas or gloves or, sanitizer, whatever they may be doing as they're passing through your buildings. One of the things you have to realize is not just the limitations as the ability to read and identify these things, but also what do you do about it when you find out that people are not, coherent or adhering to the various procedures that you'd like to establish in order to keep people safe. Some of the things that we're going to recommend or have already been done in many cases is obviously through notification and signage. Okay, so prior written notification is obviously critical, making people aware before they come to the buildings, what are the things that they can expect and be aware of. And again, this is also a lot of other people as well. The other thing is signage. Posting signage, at the kiosk, at the security, giving the direction. So again, where are you going to put it? So a lot of the buildings, you have different entries and exits. Some of your tenants may have private entries and key passes, and they may not be looking at your procedures and stuff as they might be entering it through other parts of the building, but at the same time, they may also be coming through the common areas. So one of the things is to also take a look at what your procedures are, and also to take a look at any procedures from tenants and contractors, and making sure that you have some consistency or continuity. The last thing you want is conflict. Okay, this guy says it's okay to do this, and then you also have the perception of, are people going to really follow it? One of the things that is very important to understand, though, is record keeping. It's really important that you have, all of the notifications, all the things, all your procedures, that you keep very good records in order to, one, protect yourself from liability, saying people have been made aware, but they choose not to do it or whatever. But the other thing is also in the process of record keeping, it makes you also consistent in also your own procedures and how you're handling things throughout the buildings. Okay, here's really the bottom basics. What are we talking about? COVID ID, okay? How is it getting around? Well, it's generally going from host to host or person to person. So it's transferred basically as a fine particulate, okay? So as we speak, cough, sneeze, okay, it's something that's being discharged. It's something that's in our systems that basically is coming outward and generally settling out on surfaces. So one of the fallacies that people have to be careful, this is not a vapor or gas. It's not floating around in the atmosphere. It's not getting sucked in. It's not jumping over things. It's something that's coming outward and settling on surfaces. So when we start to understand that, we understand a lot more about why are we doing some of the actions we're doing in order to contain, to protect ourselves and protect each other. Okay. The receiving person, okay, to understand the pathogens. You can be affected, through the pathogens, eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. You see a lot of people, they're wearing masks, but they're not covering their nose. Okay, well, let's put the basics. What do you see in some of these tests that people are being checked to see if they have the virus? They're doing nasal swabs. Well, that kind of tells you that not covering your nose and breathing all over your mask and doing the same things is not necessarily it's contaminating your mask as well as not really protecting yourself or others. The other thing that's important to understand is it needs a host to survive. So this particulate or this discharge basically that comes outward is going to, settle onto surfaces or onto people who would be directly contacted by it. So, but the other thing we also understand is that, just like bacteria and these viruses, they really don't survive without a host. So in a matter of hours or days, as they may be transmitted onto surfaces, they're not going to survive on their own.
Pound or hash sign.
Okay. I'm not sure what's happening with the recording system here. I've got a little something in the noise. So I hope everybody can hear me okay.
Yeah, Mike Amoroso, can you put your phone on mute? Thank you.
All right, thank you. That might be what was the interference I was getting. Okay. So again, the other thing too is how are we determining how people are being affected? Well, keep in mind that, there may be such minimum symptoms people don't know they're affected. This is something that we're becoming aware as more and more testing is done. They're doing a lot of testing randomly through police departments, senior assisted facilities and things like that. And they're starting to find out that as we're doing more testing across the board, that, maybe in a lot of places, less than 20 or even less than 10% of the people are actually testing positive. The other thing is, and I like to use this comparison a little bit, is a little of it was like, when people had the flu symptoms in the past, they didn't necessarily run to the doctors and get tested like they're doing now, where they have maybe symptoms of the virus and everybody's immediately getting tested. So you may have had it and not realized it. So there's a lot of things that are going to happen that are going to vary in whether you're even going to be detected or not, or even know that you've been affected. So we're going to talk about now controlling, as far as the interaction person to person, and obviously personal protective equipment is the key here. Now, I joked a little bit is, years ago, before we got into all the technology we have today, it used to be if you're sick, don't breathe on me, don't shake my hand. And then, okay, well, if you have the virus, we're going to put you in quarantine, we're going to do it. Now we're at the point where we don't really know who may be affected or not affected because we don't know the latency period and all this. There's still those, quite a bit of unknowns as far as contracting the virus and the symptoms and when they actually show. So one of the things that a lot of people are being asked is that, when you're within that 6 foot distance, that you're not out in your yard or something, you're going to be around people, that it's not just about wearing a mask or wearing gloves that are going to protect you, but it's also about the fact that you don't know and you're protecting each other. So it becomes, in essence, a courtesy, not just a procedure that we'd like to say, oh, you should be doing this. So face masks and gloves is the typical, as far as protecting for contact and spread, but also we have to talk about if you've been affected, that the building, there's been people who have been diagnosed positive that have been through your building and areas may have been affected. The people are going to be going into those areas, whether it's cleaning people, whether it's people who have had higher level of remediation to come in and do a more thorough cleaning, really need to consider what they're wearing, coveralls and eye protection. And it's interesting that I say eye protection because, okay, if it's settled on surfaces, why would you need eye protection? Let's go back to the concept of, okay, you're wearing a mask, and what do people like to do, especially going through allergy season? They're constantly rubbing their eyes, they're doing different things that may be getting, what you're coming in contact with through other pathogens, and you're now affecting yourself. So eye protection is included in that as something to also help ward off. So that's about it. Now, touching the eyes, touching the nose, touching the mouth. I want to talk about wearing these masks, because a big problem with it is when people are wearing the mask, again, I talked about, not covering your nose or taking the mask on and off. As you're taking the mask off, you can clean the mask. But if you're touching the mask and the mask may be affected, are you just becoming affected and getting on your hands, and now you're really not protecting yourself or others anymore? And this is something that you're going to see in public that a lot of people don't seem to understand. Okay? So wearing the mask, understanding the mask can become contaminated, and, covering the mouth and nose, taking that level of care of not just wearing the mask, but how you're handling the mask, how you're touching, your eyes and things like that and other surfaces, it can lead to cross-contamination. Therefore, we've got the hand sanitizers and things like that. I'm going to go back to the kiosk. One of the suggestions I had made the other day was you may consider putting kiosks at every floor level where the elevators are. Okay, so that not just coming out of bathrooms that people would wash their hands, but also have the hand sanitizers as people coming through the common areas. And there may be touching that you can't possibly clean those high-touch areas all day long as people are coming or going. Okay, certain masks can be cleaned and reused. Now, you'll see a lot of that. There's a whole tremendous amount of opportunities for masks that are out there. Some of the cloth masks you can wash, but if you're going to use soap and water, you really got to make sure to get all the soap rinsed out properly. You can't do that on N95 masks or certain types of masks, but you can actually clean them by simply treating them with alcohol in order to kill any of the virus or that may be affected on the mask. That could be on the surface of the mask, either from you or from other people as you've been wearing the mask. But let's now get into the part about where are people maybe not wearing the mask, where they're comfortable taking them on and off. So it's not just going beyond keeping the mask clean, not spreading it, being a courtesy to other people by wearing a mask or the common areas or keeping your distances. But also now it's a consideration of the private places and outdoors. They talk about the 6-foot rule. Now, the 6-foot rule, again, is as we breathe out and we discharge these particulates. When you're wearing the mask, the concept of the mask is that we're not discharging outwards and we're keeping things more contained. So the 6-foot rule getting into the elevators is not so restrictive as everybody is wearing masks and taking protective measures. So we really ask, as people are in these buildings, in these common areas, to respect the others and everybody be courteous in that aspect. Okay? When you get into private areas, offices, cubicle work areas where you're away from people, some of the things we talk about, again, you look at the 6-foot rule, you think about the direction of discharge. If you've got 3/4 high walls, generally they're around 6 feet, you're not really breathing over the walls. Excuse me. So, there is some level of protection between the people, just as you put the plexiglass in, between various stations when you go to the stores and stuff. So, not talking directly facing people in other directions. So, considering where people are sitting and the various barriers is obviously a consideration, something that we tend to overlook when you start looking at cubicle workspaces and used workspaces. Private offices, people, they're going to want to go to their desk and they're going to want to take the mask off. Why? Because they're very uncomfortable. They're hot. They're uncomfortable. They may even be irritating with some of the straps and the bands. So people are going to want to take them off. But you also have to understand when you're going into people's private spaces, are you protecting them? Are you possibly being affected by them? So it's really important to think about, as you're entering different areas, who's working those areas, who's sharing those spaces, and again, taking those preventive measures. This is all things that should be considered as you're putting procedures together as far as working in different spaces. How many people? Maybe there's 2 or 3 people and it's only the same people in that area, but maybe there's more people. You got the cleaning crews coming in. You've got other people coming in. What are we doing as far as that goes? And I want to come back to the cleaning people a little bit, because there's a lot that they do that may be overlooked here that's already being done. Areas that have multiple persons occupied, obviously passing through common areas, cleaning common areas versus tenant areas. Now, a lot of the cleaning people are not the same crews and may not have the same procedures between cleaning the tenant spaces and cleaning the common areas. The common areas, obviously, we want to do because we don't know who. There's a lot more different people coming through, high-touch surface areas, things like that. But one of the things I want to go back and point out is I said before that the particulate doesn't necessarily live, that the virus is going to survive for more than hours or days on surfaces. It needs a host to survive. So areas that have been unoccupied for days or weeks or longer, really to say, oh, we have to clean it for the virus, it doesn't make sense, because there shouldn't be any virus surviving under those conditions. So it's really about where people are and how they're going to be transmitting and affecting each other in the immediate as things are moving around and going through the buildings. Okay, how clean is clean? Some of the things, again, is understanding the areas have to be cleaned. Where there have been people who have been affected, there's typically two steps that are taken. When we talk about the 6-foot rule outward, we also talk about affected areas where people have to immediately come back to work, and people have been symptomatic or tested positive. What do we do about it? Well, the remediation contractors are really going to follow two basic, very important things. They're going to understand that there's a fogging procedure and a wiping down procedure. Generally, that's going to happen what I refer to as 6 feet or shoulder height down. Everywhere you could be discharging outward, the surfaces can be contaminated. We want to make sure that those areas have been treated properly. The fogging helps to get into the areas that we can't easily access, yet at the same time, without the wiping down, you don't necessarily get underneath phone receivers, moving around on desks, and some of the high-touch areas that can be affected that the fogging may not get to. So it's really a two-part step. The other thing, too, is the fogging, depending on the product, can sometimes leave a little bit of a residue. So that 6-foot down rule in the actual, expected to be or anticipated affected areas need to have that level of cleaning. Okay. Generally, there's a lot of EPA-approved products out there, but when we're talking to the viruses, some of the most common on the commercial level for this type of cleaning are going to contain peroxide. They're going to be alcohol-based. Now, some of the old alcohol-based cleaners on the commercial level, like Microban, is too low of a concentration. If you look at, most of them have some form of isopropyl alcohol, IPA, or ethanol, ethyl alcohol, at levels of 60% or higher. If you look at your hand sanitizers, they're going to have alcohol levels, and they'll give you the concentration, and it's going to say 60%, 65, 70%. Okay, that's generally where you're at in order to actually kill the virus that's immediately on surfaces. Another one are these organic solutions, these green products that generally have thyme, oil, or other type of herbal extracts that are in them that have been all approved and tested as far as the quality to kill these viruses. They're very good for things. Now, every product has its advantages and disadvantages. When you're fogging, peroxide may leave a fine residue. Is it hazardous? No. Are you going to notice it's there? Probably not. But if anybody's ever used peroxide, spilled it on your medicine cabinet, you see a little crystal, it's water soluble, you wipe it up, you call it a day. It may be nothing that you're going to notice, but you could have some residual with the wiping down. So generally the fogging would be the first step, and the wiping down would be the second step. As far as the oil-based, the extract products, they tend to leave a little bit of an oily residue. What that basically means is that, okay, if you get it on glass surfaces, it might leave a fogging, and you're going to go back over with a glass cleaner. This particular product also has been referred to as something that could be applied and fogged that can sit on surfaces for a period of time and still be active for days or possibly even a week or longer. The one thing I want to point out, though, is high-touch surfaces okay, are still going to be, or where you're wiping down and cleaning after the fact. So even if you were to apply this and not wipe it down and think, okay, I have a protected barrier, high-touch surfaces are still going to be wiping that product off the surfaces, and they still need to be. So high-touch surfaces, you still have to go back and routinely clean. Okay, you can't ignore that. That still should be addressed accordingly. Potential damage to buildings. Well, a key point I just said is that the virus isn't going to survive on most surfaces for any extended period of time. So, the actual damages are generally limited to the extent of, affecting from person to person or anything, as far as how it may be transmitted. As far as the cleaning products, though, it's really important that there's compatibility to the surfaces and areas you're being cleaned and treated. Fogging generally is not going to be done on electrical circuits. Certainly, if you're going to do a very large area and you've got, sensors for the fire detection systems, sometimes they can set off the fire alarms. So that has to be taken into consideration. Other things that can, with the fogging is obviously these people are going to have to wear respirators and things because now you're aerosoling something that even though it's going to settle out onto surfaces, the people who are going to apply it have to take extra protection as well. But, you're not going to, it's not going to necessarily affect when you're fogging computers sitting on your desk. That's been basically tested out, and I'm yet to ever see that as being a problem after thousands of applications that I see. When I say thousands, I'm talking about all the different desks and computers and things that are sitting out there. It's really an issue where you've got your backup data centers and things like that. You're not going to be fogging this material. Okay. HVAC systems. This is an area where there's probably more stuff thrown at the the building engineers than anybody. And there's so many products and so many recommendations. And the reality is, do we even need a lot of this stuff? Let's go back to the basics about the discharge of this virus. It's a particulate. It's coming out. It's being discharged at a distance and settling on surfaces. So let's talk about a building with a typical VAV system where you have a sealing plenum. It's not like you have a vacuum and it's just sucking it into your HVAC system. It's not blowing up into your ceiling plenums. It's settling out onto surfaces. But in some of the smaller retail spaces or where you have additional materials or smaller office areas, you may have smaller units and they might have lower wall, intakes and things like that, where the discharge, where people are working or talking or doing things, where you need to put up some type of a barrier, just like you would with with the plastic barriers they're putting up in the retail stores. You may want to extend and reach out or limit that people could potentially be affecting the system because of where the intakes are going to be. So again, it's really important. So there's a lot of products out there saying, oh, we can treat the flue gas, we can add more outside ventilation, we can do these things. But the reality is, don't get it in, and it's not necessarily going to come out. Now, that sounds, simple, but there's a lot to consider. Filtration, okay? We talk about MERV 13. It's about particle size, all right? MERV 13 filters generally will remove in the first pass as much as 85–90% of the particulate because it's a fine particulate. Now, I'm going to talk, this particulate obviously is microfine. We can't see it. So the particles are generally, when we're talking about the flue, is anywhere from 0.3 microns up to about 10 microns. MERV 10 filters, or MERV 8 to MERV 10 filters, generally can remove anywhere from 70 to 85% above 1 micron. Okay? So as you start to get into the smaller micron range, that's where you start to get a little bit more how much of the filter is doing. But again, the consideration is it really getting in the system? Has we prevented it? So, if you think about the flu virus, we haven't been putting all this extra equipment in because we're spreading the flu virus through the system. Well, it's spread pretty much the same way. So using a lot of the same common sense is really important. Okay? So again, it's not just pulling it in, but looking at how air is tempered and circulated. So recirculation is important. Exhaust air. One of the things that also is going to affect you, as far as ventilation is, I thought it was on this slide, it must be my next one, is other considerations is portable fans. Well, a lot of people want to put the fans and say, oh, I'm going to run the fans. I'm not going to run the HVAC or whatever, the air conditioning. You're probably better off running the air conditioning, especially if you take some measures not to affect your system. But when you're starting to put fans, okay, your particulate is going 6 feet out and you're blowing a fan on a person. Obviously, it's going to make a difference. I don't think I need to explain that further. So other things that a lot of the talk about with the components, UV lights, ionization, a lot of other stuff. You can talk to your HVAC, providers for all of that. But none of it is really, even though it's been proven to have an effect, none of it's proven to really be effective. And that's the most difficult part about it. So you're being asked to put a lot of stuff in for prevention, but not necessarily is it preventing the problem. So again, taking the measures, looking at how it's discharged, how the virus is spread, taking the proper steps is the most important thing. Here's just a simple example of all the things that you're looking at, as far as a ventilation system. But again, when you're looking at it, unless you see like the intakes, I wish I had a pointer I could show you here. I don't know if that would work. But, you've got your outside air and things like that. But bringing in more outside air and thinking that you're going to turn the air over more doesn't necessarily mean you won't affect the system. But the bottom line is the system being affected? I'm going to say that over and over again, because that's really the first thing we have to think about, prevention. Okay? Something else beyond that a lot of people aren't thinking about. The building's been shut down for a long time. So there's a concern about stagnant water systems, especially when it comes to potable water. The drinking water supply, the chlorine and stuff is going to dissipate, and the stuff that's going to prevent the microbes and bacteria and things that can be growing in the water are not as preventive as they should be. So one of the things that needs to be done is you really have to consider purging all your water supply lines. And that's generally going beyond, waiting until the water gets cold, purging it for another 5 minutes, and taking into consideration. Now, potable water, we're talking everything you might be drinking. But I would also go beyond that. I would even go to the level of saying anything that go into your bathrooms where people might, be filling a coffee pot with. Because, again, every building's different. So I'm putting out all the examples for consideration. Water coolers that may have a water line to it. Refrigerators that have ice makers. So, all of these things where the water should be, you should consider, getting rid of the ice, cleaning the unit, purging the line, doing these things in order to get fresh water supply. So we're not going to have any issues with potentially bacterial problems that could be going forward. As far as fire suppression systems go, and your cooling water systems, for your ventilation, there should be written procedures already in place for this. And I would recommend that, go back to your HVAC guys, go back to it, deal with your Legionella procedures that have been mostly established over the past few years, for your cooling systems. Make sure it's being followed. Make sure that the system's been tested or checked, and you should be fine. So the written procedures, the in-out procedures, generally, if you follow them, you should be fine. But really take into consideration the potable water supplies. What I'm most concerned about, and what this whole thing is about, is identifying the potential problems. What is the threat? How is it being discharged? How is it being, contacted, and can people be affected? When I say there's no definitive proof, is because we're still learning a lot about the virus. Okay, so I'm not going to play doctor and say anything can happen, but we do have that high level of fear that some people have. I like to use the mold word as an example. I could see somebody with a thumbprint or a handprint size mark on a wall, and people are scared to death there's mold growing there. And I'll have other people say, yeah, we know there's mold there. It's crawling up the wall. We're going to get to it. We just haven't gotten to it yet. There's a lot of people with different things. These are things that we've been dealing with over time. The virus is something that we're more concerned about because of the high level of contagion. That, it's been spread so easily that's why we're taking all these extra measures. So again, it's not about just are we affected and those affected people and we've identified them, but it's about the fact that we don't know if we've been affected and that we're all going to take equal measures to protect each other. So when you're putting your procedures together, looking at the mask, looking at the common areas and cleaning, there's one thing that I kind of skipped over and I want to come back to is the cleaning crews. One of the things when I talk about with the cleaning and the regular surfaces and stuff, and we talk about products for cleaning from the flu virus, the products, all those antimicrobial cleaners that we're cleaning the buildings with, all the high touch areas from the bathrooms to the hallways and all the other things, those products are still absolutely acceptable and should continue to be followed on those same procedures. Why? We are cleaning the surfaces, and that's what this is about. So those areas where you've got high traffic, where people are coming through and we're doing them, all those things are those cleaning crews. So when you're looking at your procedure and say, how much more do we need to do, start with what cleaning you're already routine doing and then see what you need to do in addition to that. Okay? So that kind of, really hits on it. I don't want to go backwards with that. So it's a lot to think about. It's a lot of different areas. I wanted to basically touch those areas, but I'd really like to have a chance now to, answer some questions and be more specific about what you're running into at the buildings that you're entering and working at. So, Pat, I'd like to kind of kick that over for some Q&A and discussion if we could. Pat, you there?
Okay, I am here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. It was a great presentation. We just want to unmute your microphones. I unmuted quite a few of them. And let's see if we could get some questions. I know we had one comment that was sent in earlier. Any comments on staggering the number of people passing through lobbies at any one time?
Well, certainly, again, the masks help a lot where people are passing each other. So looking at egress helps to have egress limited. But as far as staggering the people, if you're going to line up that you're going to be right next to each other, again, the 6-foot rule is opportunistic in an added prevention, even though you may be wearing masks or wearing gloves. Keep in mind that the masks that the people are generally wearing are from you affecting other people, which is why we ask when you're in the common areas that everybody wear the mask where you're all passing each other and going to be around each other. One of the places you can't avoid really is elevators, okay? We can't spend 4 hours getting everybody into the office building, okay? So there are going to be some areas that are unwarranted. But if you're lining up as a security desk so everybody can sign in to do their work, allowing a reasonable distance would certainly be the proper procedure and recommended. Again, I'll use the example of, so that's common areas. But again, don't forget, even when you're working in cubicle work areas, considering some staggering so that, God forbid, if people do want to start taking their mask off, as often it seems to be happening, that they're working in a place where they're not affecting each other's workspace. Okay? Hopefully that answers that question.
All right. We have one from Jeff Brandt. What are your recommendations on the number of people in each elevator and how or where should they face?
Well, first, everybody in the elevator should be wearing masks. Okay? So that we're not breathing or discharging, and they certainly should hopefully not be touching more surfaces than they need to. Of course, everybody has to operate the elevator, so we can't put people in the elevators to operate them for you. So taking into consideration, the buttons, hand sanitizer, which is why I made the comment earlier, putting hand sanitizers at each level for the elevators. But as far as the number of people in the elevators, I would say this, depending on the size of the elevator, as long as you're not physically contacting the other person and you're not directly breathing, that you're discharging, there'd be a reasonable amount of space. A 6-foot rule is never going to apply. But I would certainly say that if you can keep at least a couple of feet away from each other and give each other some proper space would be the ideal answer. You can't limit. So again, some of these elevators, you could probably put as many as 8 people in it, 8 to 10 people, and they're not all crowded that they're shoulder to shoulder like that. So I would say if you could try to keep a couple of feet between people and take that into kind of like an estimator, that might be the best answer I can give you.
Okay. From Michael, what are the benefits, limitations to the fogging technology? Is there information out there that it is not effective for COVID-19?
The fogging alone would not be enough. As I tried to imply earlier, that the fogging is not going to get to everything. So fogging is a preventive measure that maybe will be on the walls where people generally aren't touching. But if you're not touching, you're not coming in contact, you're not really spreading. The fogging really serves two purposes. When you're going in to treat for potentially affected areas, one, by fogging, especially if you're doing the fogging before the wiping down of touch areas, touch surfaces, high touch surfaces, would be to help protect the person doing the cleaning as well, and the remediation. So that's why I like to recommend that you do the fogging first and then the wiping down. Not only that, but also clean any residual from the fogging. Does the fogging alone help? Probably not, because all the high touch surfaces are still going to be touched. And if you're not going to come in contact with those surfaces, then really what are you doing? And again, it doesn't survive for indefinite periods of time on, without a host. So within a matter of hours or days, it's not going to make much of a difference anyway. So really with the fogging, you're trying to say, okay, if I'm discharging on a surface, will it be clean for the first time, or a few times it might be in contacted. But it's not going to be an absolute by itself. It really needs to be incorporated with the routine cleaning of high touch surfaces.
Thank you. Okay, from Mark Hockenjos, what tests do you recommend to identify the presence of the COVID virus and or the effectiveness of the cleaning of high touch surfaces?
Well, it's definitely a two-part answer. First off, to test the effectiveness, doing aerosol samples isn't probably going to do much since we're talking about particulate. Doing surface samples could never be absolute. There is no definitive proof. And the reason being is a surface sample is simply where you simply swabbed or tested that surface. So the real critical part about giving some type of a proof would be the level or thoroughness in which the cleaning has been provided. So it's really the prevention. There's no absolute. So if you're saying, can we test it to give a guarantee that it's been fully done? No, what we can do is say that we're going to warrant the fact that we're going to be incredibly thorough. We're going to have people that are going to follow through. We're going to watch the surfaces. We're going to check the surfaces. And again, there's some common sense too. When it comes to wiping down and cleaning, you're going to be able to typically have some sense of how clean those surfaces are by just general observations, as well as monitoring the work that's being done. So a lot of it is, yes, it's in the faith that the people are doing it properly, and hiring the people that you can have the trust to do that is critical. At the same time, you're not going to have any definitive proof. You can test. Now, the other part of the question is, how would you test? Well, obviously, you can take a sample. There's various ways of collecting surface samples, and you would submit those samples to a laboratory for analysis. There's quite a few labs out there doing them now. They're all over the place. So I would say you could Google and find most labs. The labs are being certified as far as that they know the proper procedures to identify the virus. So there's literally hundreds and thousands of them out there all over the states. You don't have to go out of state for them. So so as far as finding a place to do the testing, just as a person can be tested, there are certain labs to do for surface testing. I would say just go online and you'll see all the labs have been already approved.
I have a question on that. What is the turnaround for your testing?
Well, again, it's how quick you get it to the lab, and how quick the lab can turn it around. The testing should all be in less than 24 hours.
And who brings it to the lab?
Well, it could be couriered, personally dropped off, or overnight.
I mean, exactly how do you perform the test on the surface if you're doing it in-house?
There's going to be swab tests that are going to generally be done.
Okay.
But again, I usually don't, I mean, if you're looking, let me go to a specific example and try to break it down that way. Because I don't necessarily promote that surface testing is going to be definitive. So, it'll only tell you the area you sampled. So the example I want to put out there is where are you going to collect your sample from? Okay. So if you have a person who was sitting at a desk and you're not sure, they might have had some symptoms and went home, and I want to take a surface sample and have that checked right away. And keep in mind, it's not going to be perfect. Because the virus may not survive. So collecting a swab sample right away from the time the person was there, getting it to a lab, it's going to be very difficult in really proving what's there. So again, just as you would do bacterial testing, it would be a type of swab test. It would be on a selected, targeted area, and it would be submitted. But as far as getting to the lab, it's where the lab is and how you're going to have it couriered there. And then, of course, working with the lab on the turnaround time.
All right. Thank you. From Jeff Grant, some vendors are pushing bipolar ionization to disable the virus with negative ions dispersed through the space via the supply air system. What are your thoughts on this technology?
I'm not convinced. That's the best answer I can give you. First off, I'm going to go back to what I said before. It's difficult to get in the system to begin with, and taking prevention to not contaminate the HVAC system is important. Most systems, the way they're already designed, are unlikely to be affected. But so prevention is the most important part to that, because if you don't, so it's unlikely that it's going to survive and get into the system in the first place. To think that you're spreading this ionization out into the air, there's just not enough data to really say how effective it is. And so if I sound like a skeptical, I am. I'm just being honest.
Okay. There's a question submitted earlier today. Does anyone think the virus can travel from a tenant space through the HVAC system and back into another tenant space?
Well, and I knew HVAC would be a lot of the questions, and I'm glad, and thank all of you for these questions, because this is the ones I was hoping to really put to bed. Again, it's highly unlikely that the system is being affected. Again, the filtration system is probably the most important. If you can have at least a MERV 13 filter, you're probably blocking what little bit could get into the system in the first place before you even consider other types of products in the system. As far as traveling through, again, so from one tenant space to the other, the probability, there's no testing. There's no proof that I can give you definitively, but the fact that the probability is so very low, if I was to say from a statistical perspective, it's so highly unlikely that, again, just taking preventive measures, putting some blockage like a good filter in place, and simply making sure that your intakes and the way that the air is being pulled into the system is not drawing it from areas that may be affected, is the best way to say it's not likely to happen. So if you've taken those considerations, I, with the confidence of being a health and safety person, would say they should not be affected.
Thank you. From David White, bathrooms can be a tricky area to control. Any suggestions on controlling occupancy at any one time?
Probably the time that's most interesting is when everybody's coming back from lunch or getting ready to go to lunch. I would think are probably the highest traffic times. One is obviously signage, making sure if you've got non-touch faucets and things like that, it's huge. Dryers, things are good. But again, so as long as people are cleaning their hands, then wiping the door handles and things on the way out shouldn't be so critical. I know some of the bathrooms, they do have baffles where they have a door that you can enter. so you don't have to do too much touching of the doors, but still provide privacy to the people in the bathrooms. On the other hand, a lot of the bathrooms have locks. So you have to take into a little consideration what's your individual thing. And where I'm going with this is there's two parts of the answer. Again, you're talking about spacing and the number of people in the bathroom, and hopefully that what people are doing. Now, I'm going to use something. All of us have heard, I don't know how many people have heard the commercial about phone soap, but I love it for the example of what it provides. How many people go to the bathrooms and touch their phones? And what's going on and touching other surfaces. So we don't even think about all the other things that we're doing when we go into the bathrooms. Some of the things I would put in is to say, when you go into the bathrooms, please be discreet, do your business and leave, don't linger, don't use your phones or touch things that may be, that could put you or others at risk. Obviously cleaning your hands, as you're leaving, coming in, and also the same concept. People come from the elevators and go straight to the bathrooms. I like the idea that you have the hand sanitizers in those common areas as you're passing through, and recommend that, look, as you're coming out of those common areas, please consider, using the hand sanitizers, using your mask when you're in there, recommending that people wear the mask when they're in the bathrooms, because you can't clean the bathrooms nonstop. As far as the spacing goes, I would give the same consideration. If you're wearing masks, probably as long as you've got a few feet between you, and if you think about where the sinks are, you're going to have maybe about 2 feet between each person, with the way the sinks are typically spaced. That would be acceptable if everybody's wearing a mask. If people are not wearing the mask, I would probably say you want to stagger it more. Okay. So if you can get some type of a signage or procedure and say, look, this is out of respect for everybody that uses the bathroom, please follow these steps, and try to do your best to get people to follow those steps through education between the property, the people who are commonly handling it, as well as tenants in the building that are using those spaces. That's where the procedures come in. That's where the signage comes in. That's where some observations and politeness comes in. Attacking people for not wearing the mask or maybe not being as considerate as you like is not constructive. One thing that's really, really important is to help people to understand why we're asking them to do these things, and to politely get them to do this and why. All right. As far as the spacing goes, again, wearing the mask, taking the preventive measures is going to be decisive, just like getting on and off an elevator. I rarely go into these buildings where the bathrooms are that crowded, but hopefully that answers your question. If you want a limited number of people, you can certainly try to look at your space and say so many people at a time, but how are you going to know how many people are in the bathroom to begin with? You can't. So you have to send some guidelines, some signage, and say, look, if you're going to come into the bathroom, please allow a certain distance, that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Next one is from Gene Herman. Can bacterial testing be used as a guide for the surface cleaning?
Absolutely. Bacterial testing, Streptococcus is what's in our saliva all the time. So the reason I'm going to give you something that I learned about the 6-foot rule and why I know it's true. About 16, 17 years ago, we were worried about Streptococcus and certain things that could be, human commensal bacteria. And so I actually had a tenant say, you know what, let's do some tests, I'll pay for them. And what we actually did was we did some air samples. And what the air samples were is we set up at a 4 and 6 foot distances, and we had people talk, sneeze, and cough. And the reality was for bacteria, which was Streptococcus. And the Streptococcus, basically, like I said, it's in your saliva. Everybody has it. So it's a type of bacteria that we can all check on and see the distances. So if you were to simply test for Streptococcus species, you would certainly can use that as a test for cleanliness. Absolutely. Now that's for discharge for the virus. Okay. And it probably has the same survival rate as well as far as days to possibly hours. I'm sorry, hours to days, however you want to say it. So bacteria is a very good example of how you could be testing for cleanliness. Yes.
Okay, we have another one from Jeff Grant. Hospitals routinely utilize...
You're breaking up a little bit.
What's that?
A little better. Go ahead.
Okay, hospitals routinely utilize ultraviolet lighting systems to sanitize patient room air. Is there any application for continuous UV in high-touch areas such as elevator push buttons?
Okay, you're basically talking about UV light for the most part, and there's certain side effects also that come with that. The different type of lighting or electrostatic equipment, different things of that sort. Again, it's very subjective to the proximity in which it can actually be functional and effective. They use that to try to reduce what is present, but it's not definitive that it's going to redo it. The reason you have it in those rooms is because you're in a space. Now, this is unique. You're in an area where people are affected, and that's why they're using them. I'm going to give you an extreme example. When they talk about having these lights going through warehouses and hallways and stuff, again, it's going to be incredibly limited to how proximity and the effectiveness of the light and what it's coming in contact with. So it's very limited to the distance and the space and how the air is being circulated through it. So depending on the space and the type of unit, the level of effectiveness, but they're not definitive. They're basically to reduce the level that's there.
Okay, we'll have a last call for questions if anyone wants to ask directly.
Did I exhaust everybody?
Yeah, right? Okay, let me just go through, make sure I got through everything. I mean, we had one question from a while ago. Do you recommend using bleach to clean?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch that real quick. When you think about the fact that one of the most common symptoms is respiratory type reactions to having to contracting the virus, chlorine gas, which off gases from using chlorine as a cleaning solution. The chlorine gas is hygroscopic. It reacts with the mucous membrane and any moisture in the body to become acidic. So it's highly irritant and corrosive. So if you're talking about the risk of a respiratory condition, coming in contact with the chlorine fumes is just going to aggravate and make the situation worse. So we do not recommend it for cleaning up as a follow-up to the virus.
Okay, I think we have a couple more questions coming in. How about, this is from Jeffrey, how about increasing the quality, let me start again. How about increasing the quantity of outside air to dilute virus concentrations? We want to save energy, and this certainly drives up our costs if we increase outside ventilation air. So is it worth the COVID mitigation benefit?
Well, there's two things I want to point out on that. One is something new that just came through today that I'll share with you. But the other point I'll make is, first off, prevention is always what I'm going to say. Prevention. If you're not getting it into the system, if you have the filters, you've already 99% chance are not going to have the risk. So increasing the air and running up your utility bills, it's not necessarily solving anything. Now, as far as a lot of the systems that have environmental controls, and this is the second part to it, carbon dioxide, tracer gas, it's what we exhale, okay? Going back 15 years ago, ASHRAE has allowed us, for those American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, Air Conditioning Engineers Association, basically establishes the guidelines for the HVAC systems. It has allowed us to use CO2 sensors to figure out if we're bringing enough fresh air into the building. The other thing that we have is economizers that allow us to bring more fresh air if it's favorable based on temperature and humidity for energy efficiency. So you have two controls there that have been set in place to help with energy efficiency. Do we need more air that we're going to have to temper or control for humidity as well as temperature? Or can we bring in more because it's favorable to cool or heat the air without affecting the temperature or humidity? These controls are very well established at this point, and they go back at least a decade or two. So, and a lot of the larger buildings have automated systems that use these controls. I still favor them a lot. By bringing in more of the outside air, you're basically not just running up the bill, but you're trying to dilute, or should I say the expression dilution is a solution. I think that the preventive measures I've talked about are going to be much more successful than having to bring in more excess air other than what's favorable at the time. A good example would be purging the building overnight. When you're getting to the dew point overnight and you're going to have much higher humidity levels in order to bring in that fresh air, how much more do we have to temper or work the system to get that humidity out is not necessarily helping the system. It may also be overwhelming the system with too much moisture, especially now that we're in the hot temperatures of summer. Then now you're going to have a lot more moisture that's got to be condensed out, and you may be having too much moisture building up in your systems, in your pans. And now I'm going to worry about bacteria and other things because of being overwhelmed moisture conditions in your HVAC system. So be aware that the humidity is a very sensitive thing. I'm more worried about that than bringing in too much outside air. I will say that there are other examples where some of the property managers are dealing with pharmaceuticals, where they're doing packaging and manufacturing of products. It's 100% outside air. They have systems that are designed specifically to do that work. I would answer those questions on a specific level.
Thank you. From Jean Herman, can thermometer testing be compromised by drinking hot beverage before testing? I have been told that you may get a false reading and that some test areas are now having a cool-down room.
Well, I'm going to go past the hot drink, and I'm going to say if you ate hot peppers, you'd have the same effect. It will raise your body temperature, absolutely. So the answer is yes, you can get false readings. First off, when we talk about 98.3 or whatever, we start talking about the average body temperature, people vary to begin with. If I have a person that sat in a hot car for an extended period of time and then came into the building, okay, they're going to have an elevated body temperature. If I have a person who was literally in the sun, you're going to have an elevated. And again, so when we're talking about the body temperature, are we talking about taking an internal body temperature, or are we talking about scanning on the surface of somebody's forehead? So all of it can be affected. At the same time, you can fictitiously lower your body temperature by saying if you had a headache and a slight fever, you took some aspirin to reduce the fever, now you've actually lowered your body temperature. So the answer is you can definitely get false readings. One of the things that I'm going to go back to my presentation when I talk about what do you do if somebody fails is you should be prepared with some form of a questionnaire that's going to help take some additional preventive measures. So if a person tests high, doesn't mean that they have the virus or they're sick and actually are conducting a fever, but also that you may question them, not just say, hey, you can't come into the building, but say, okay, now what's the questionnaire? What is your procedure for handling that? Do we ask, where have you been? Are you aware that you've been in contact with people? Have you been in a public place that you may be putting others at risk? Will you please wear a mask or wear gloves or other preventive measures should you proceed? So you should have, this is a very important procedure to consider, is what do you do now if a flag goes up? How do you react to that? You can't just be a bully. You can't just dismiss it. So you're going to have to put some procedures in place, treat people with respect, and say, well, respectively, we need to do this, and this is why.